Anigame reminds me of Kotobukiya a lot. Yeah, balancing price and quality in a way. Hi and welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven, today with a scale figure review of another Chinese brand that I'm trying for the first time. But this is not your typical low budget brand. This brand makes premium scale figures. They are not the cheapest stuff, but the value you're getting is kind of exceptional. They're around 22,000 yen price range, and you get a big 1/6 scale. So this review is partially coming from request from you guys. In my figure news feeds, the comments, I do read all of them, and I've seen a few asking me to review figures by Anigame. So here we are. This is Anigame's 1/6 scale Implacable from Azur Lane, going for an official price of 22,000 yen internationally in Japanese websites, which is a great price for 1/6 scale. But over in China, as usual, a bit cheaper, 968 Chinese yuan officially, which would be the equivalent of around 18,000 yen, I think, which is normal. Almost every Chinese brands I've seen, their prices are cheaper in mainland China, including Impact Stores, Mietos, and so on. I did not purchase this figure from Japan or China. This is one of those rare occasions I bought from a local figure store in my country because they happened to have her in stock. It is a relatively new release, and the prices are reasonable. I paid 670 Malaysian ringgit for her, and these are the conversions on screen for US dollar and Japanese yen, so that is fabulous pricing for local brick and mortar figure store, because you need to factor in shipping cost when you import a figure and also taxes, which in my case, in my country, it is 10%. The release date of this figure is actually late February in China. China exclusive batch, they are always early, very early. For everyone else, this figure came out on the 29th of May 2025, so barely 2 months old. This is a very new figure, which I'm sure a number of you who pre-ordered her would have her by now. The height of this figure, including the base but not including this headpiece over here, I'm not sure what to call it, this gold color object, all the way to the top of her head over here, that would be exactly 30 centimeters or 12 inches. This thing adds an additional 1 centimeter or so. If you deduct the base, 28 cm, which is still very tall for a 1/6 scale female character, right? So why is this so affordable? Well, number one, this is not the best Azur Lane scale figure brand out there. I think Anigame is behind Apex Toys and Alta, but not in a bad way. I think their goal is not to offer the best figure ever, but to offer great value for people who are unwilling to spend 30,000-40,000 yen on a scale figure, and that is actually a good thing. So basically, Anigame reminds me of Kotobukiya a lot. Yeah, balancing price and quality in a way. And if there is one place where they cut corners, it has to be the box. So this is what her box looks like. I did the unboxing in a separate video almost a month ago. And this thing is so flimsy. Very soft, in fact. Like, this thing would be smashed flat if the postman decided not to be kind to a parcel. This is not protecting the figure at all. And once again, this part over here on top of her head, yeah, it is very concerning because this thing is the most fragile part of this figure. But yeah, I bought this in store. Even when the figure was in stock in a store, this box wasn't in good condition. There are some dents at the corners, but I did not mind that. This is very minor damage, so I bought it anyway because the price was good. But this is not a good box. This is like a 5 out of 10 box. I wish that the quality of the box was better to protect the figure. Moving on to the unboxing process, very straightforward. You just plug the figure into the base, one single metal foot peg, and place this head scarf on top of her head. And this is one of my main concerns over here. So it is this loose, straight out from the box. This piece is just sitting on top of her head, though there shouldn't be any problem. It is sitting there just fine. However, my concern, obviously, is that in case you accidentally knock into the figure, this part might fall off and land on the floor, and then you end up fracturing this piece over here behind her head. That is my concern. But at the same time, I can kind of understand why they made it so loose. There is a practical reason for it, and that is to prevent paint transfer. Yes. So if this part was too tight, then eventually the grey color paint would end up rubbing on her head, which wouldn't be a nice thing. So I suppose that being loose is not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, magnets would be ideal, I know. You don't like holes in the anime figures, going by the comments I saw in my Asuma Toki Blue Archive figure review from Max Factory. I get that. Wouldn't magnets work, right? Well, the thing is that magnets itself is cheap, but the process of embedding magnet into an anime figure during the manufacturing process is a bit complicated and expensive. I suppose that they couldn't do it on a scale figure like this, 22,000 yen 1/6 scale. Yeah, my own speculation, but I suppose the cost is one of the main reasons. So having done this more than a couple dozen times by now, removing the headscarf, putting it back, doing it over the course of the past few weeks, there are no paint transfer issues over here, so I suppose that loose is not a bad thing. Now, that single metal foot peg is a bit disappointing. I wish that there is one more foot peg, like one leg each, instead of one single metal foot peg. I get that this figure's weight distribution is quite balanced. It is not an action pose, so she does not require additional reinforcement. But because of that one single short metal foot peg, what you get is a pretty wobbly figure, especially front to rear. You look at her from the side, as you can see, she shakes quite a bit. Yeah, so this is a bit disappointing. I wish that there is more reinforcement on the stability of the figure. But you won't have to worry about leaning. It won't happen to a figure like this. So stability, will give it a score of 6 out of 10 maximum. Now moving on to the sculpting of this figure. I mentioned Kotobukiya earlier when it comes to comparing this brand to another established brand, and that remains true throughout the rest of today's review. Sculpting is not the most detailed in the world, but at the same time, there are no flaws to be found, no ugly gaps or seam lines. In fact, that is quite rare nowadays, which is a good thing. And everything is sculpted to perfection, no quality control issues in general, right? And this really reminds me of Kotobukiya. They look at the official artwork, the official character art, they stick to it, but they don't add more. They stay faithful to the original artwork, and then they just do a faithful replication into a figure, which is what we're getting over here, right? Alter is coming out with an Implacable figure. I think that is not yet on pre-order, not even painted yet. If you want something better, maybe Alter is the way to go. But what we're getting over here is something that is average or above average, yet very competent at the same time, I would say. Yeah, so the sculpting I would give for this figure is like a 7 out of 10 maximum, which is not a very high score, but at the same time, for a 20,000 yen scale figure, it is a very good score. Yeah. Moving on to the face, I can give it an 8.5 out of 10 easily. The face is not like exceptionally pretty, but at the same time, it is accurate once again. I keep using the word accurate because it is what it is. And it is subjective whether you want to display her with the headscarf or without. I suppose that you get to see her face a lot clearer without this headscarf over here, but I prefer to keep it on because it makes the figure look more detailed. Especially with these horns over here. Yeah, it is like an identity of this character, Implacable. And one more thing about the sculpt department is that you can remove the skirt around her waist over here, which I chose not to because the pegs are super tiny, super fragile. I chose not to risk it. There are 2 pegs in front and behind respectively. 4 of them, all of them very tiny. And if you manage to remove the skirt over here, well, you get to see her wearing a G-string. Oh, very hot. I kept the skirt on because number 1, parts are fragile, and number 2, it is a bit weird to have the upper half of the figure fully dressed but the bottom half almost undressed. It is weird, so I kept it on for the sake of details as well. Moving on to the paintwork, similar story all over again. Shading wise, weathering, there is some of it. The most obvious will be her skin region and her opie, her chest. You get some pink color tinge. The white color parts are not exactly white color. There are some color gradients as well. So it is not like the figure is lacking detail. There is some weathering, just that a really light layer, not a very strong kind. And then, of course, if you remove the headscarf, you look at her hair, this is where the shading is the most obvious. The similar kind of shading I see in every anime character that comes with a pale blonde hair. I think even Saber from Fate Stay Night and a few other characters, their hair look exactly the same, down to the kind of shading they get. So this is about par for the course for a figure that cost 22,000 yen. If there are any flaws, I initially did not notice it until much later. So this is very similar to the Nikkei volume figure I reviewed from Max Factory just days ago. A single spot or mark. This kind of flaw normally comes from the contamination during the painting process. Maybe there is a dust particle or something else that landed on the surface of the figure and then they painted over it. This is something extremely common, unfortunately. Meanwhile, on the front, on one side of her dress over here, you can see a major amount of paint bleeding. Grey color paint bleeding over into the gold color regions for the paintwork. I am going to reduce it to 6 out of 10. This is a major paint bleeding and not really a good look. And finally, for the base of this figure, now I have received comments on this kind of fluffy base feeling cheap and you don't like it, the kind of negative remark on this fluffy cloth base, which was also used in a number of other figures, including my Asuna Ichinose from Blue Archive by Max Factory. Now, my opinion on bases like this, I think it depends on your previous experiences with other figures that also had a cloth base, and some can be pretty bad. The one I remember best, it is not exactly this kind of fluffy base, but it was a cloth base, a fabric base. Kadokawa and KD Call's Ram and Ram. It was from many years ago. The Ram and Ram figures were sleeping posts lying on the ground, and they had these beanie bags, right? That looks like a pillow or a mattress. It was made of cloth with some filling inside. I had experience handling those two figures in an anime figure exhibit event in my country many years ago. So I got to touch them, I got to inspect them, and those were some of the worst bases I've ever seen. The nylon-like cloth, and then inside the pillow, there was no cotton. It was styrofoam balls, those tiny styrofoam balls. And it felt like the cheapest garbage I've ever seen in a figure that cost like 15,000 yen. So I get it. If you have experiences with figures that made use of really cheap quality materials, then this may seem like a turn off initially. But for this specific figure, I don't think it is that bad. It is perfectly acceptable, right? Not the worst quality I've seen. And once again, I think Anigame has a practical reason for using this cloth material for the base. I suspect it is to conceal the fact that these pieces over here from her dress is not sitting flush with the surface of the base. I mean, imagine if the surface was a diorama, maybe a wooden floor texture, or maybe just a plain plastic disc, solid surface. And then you have all these parts floating in mid-air, not touching the ground. That would look pretty weird. So in order to conceal the fact that this is not sitting flat on a solid surface, they went for this material over here, which in my opinion is actually genius. Apex Toys and their Ningguang from Genshin Impact has this problem, right? That Ningguang figure has all this cloth going all the way down to the floor, and it is not sitting flat on the surface of the base, and it looked weird. It isn't natural, and I think Anigame is trying to avoid that. Smart move over here, not complaining. So the base, I can give it a 7.5 out of 10. Though it really needs an additional metal rod for the foot peg over there. So this brings us to my conclusion with today's figure review. Anigame, while being a small company at the moment, they are not as big as Apex Toys yet. They feel like the Kotobuki of China, in a way. And that is actually a good thing. Anigame is going by the same business model where they give you competitively priced figures, big size, and quality is kind of competent. So there is nothing wrong with that kind of business model. I don't think they're aiming to be the best over here. So this figure, or Anigame as a brand, comes as recommended if you are the kind who is seeking for value. You are not looking for the absolute best. You couldn't justify 30,000 yen for an anime figure. Then you may want to take a look at Anigame's 1x6 scale Azur Lane figures, which is not as exorbitant as some other brands. So I hope that you found this review helpful and informative. If it is, please do give this video a like, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel for more anime figure content every week. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.